Putin's final warning to the West for blowing up Nord Stream pipelines and the Crimean bridge, one of the major events in the energy industry, which has recently grown much more important on the European continent and around the world than the financial and military sectors put together, is being held in Moscow this week. It's known as Russian Energy Week. The schedule is customarily jam-packed with conferences, talks, and meetings at the highest ministerial levels, but it is unlikely to be untrue to suggest that Vladimir Putin, who customarily addresses the attendees with a welcome speech, set the major leitmotif and vector of REW. This particular statement proved to be particularly strict, precise, and unforgiving of ambiguous interpretation. If we closely examine the Russian president's address, the basic message is very clear. Europe has one final chance to realize who it really is, not to declare independence from Russia or even to make peace with it, but to at least rescue itself as winter approaches. The very first remark made it plain that Russia had finally stepped away from diplomatic linguistic courtesy, that the protocol had been postponed until better times, and that everything would henceforth be called by their true names. Vladimir Putin in particular referred to the sabotage of the three branches of the Nord Stream pipeline as an act of international terrorism. That is, while Sweden plays games with the general scenario of "we conducted an investigation of the accident but we will not show you the results," the Russian leader without doubt hammers into the heads of those present and sitting at the monitors, based on the conclusions of his own special services, that this was an attack and a terrorist attack. Furthermore, the attack was not just directed against Russia, but also at the entire European Union. And the principal objective of this unprecedented in its lawlessness move was to ruin any chance of the European Union establishing mutual advantageous commercial relations with Moscow. Additionally, according to Putin, what we are dealing with is actually a widespread multinational act of international terrorism whose planners and ideological leaders are well known to all, the European Union's complete subjugation and the maximization of profit through the sale of their own energy resources at exorbitant prices are the only objectives of the foreign players who have started down the path of energy terror. Although the identity of the primary beneficiary and a fan of fixing issues by extremely nefarious means is not immediately obvious, it's already so for anyone who has not fallen off the moon 10 minutes ago. The next and most important issue is that trading does not always follow the logical and customary order. Nobody can fault Russia for the fact that it has occasionally, at least for an hour, ceased to be a trustworthy supply of energy supplies that are so scarce in the old world. Annually, Moscow would knock on the doors of European governments, ministries, and specialized businesses with the proposition to sign long-term agreements that would be advantageous to all participants in the market equally. Long-term agreements maintain the stability of supplies and prices, which in the recent chaotic years have more frequently danced wild Krakowiak than remained peaceful. Such contracts detail all potential events of force majeure and changes in the price of commodities, but spot transactions were instead implemented in Europe without a substitute. Putin is not shy about expressing himself and strikes at the most painful point, the wallet of the regular EU person. According to the most cautious projections, the EU will incur additional losses of 300 billion euros as a result of the rejection of long-term contracts and the shift to spot. Once again, extra losses will be withdrawn from Germany, France, and Italy family budgets, and among others. Lulling claims, the Russian president continues, that unthinkingly rejected goods from the East can be replaced by imports from across the seas have already proven to be false. Liquefied natural gas sailed to European ports just when it costs in Asian markets increased, and at that point all gas haulers who were not bound by any long-term commitments, simply turned around and headed south. Not a single word of promotion, just plain facts, well recognized in Brussels. Allowing ourselves to momentarily interrupt the president, we will give the floor to another speaker in order to appreciate the totality of the picture as well as the saturation of the REW's semantic palette. Alex Miller put the icing on the cake as the audience, far beyond the confines of the Moscow exhibition hall, was digesting the first part of what they heard. Without Russian gas, entire cities could practically freeze in winter, according to the chairman of Gazprom, and there are no guarantees that the European Union will live up to the April heat in its existing composition and form. It's worth noting that the Western media overlooked this absolutely undiplomatic attack with remarkable unity. That is, there is just nothing to object to Alexei Miller and the normal admonitions of their own people appearing to be highly hesitant to accept. The Nord Stream pipelines are given special attention. Putin, clearly relying on a detailed technical analysis, claims that it is possible to rebuild pipelines wrecked by sabotage, but Russia does not yet see the value. This will only appear if the European Union does not freeze, but instead returns to the calm practice of trade that existed prior to the onset of the suicidal sanctions hysteria. In a nutshell, Vladimir Vladimirovich proposes that Europe return to physical reality, understand its own requirements, and everything would return to normal. Streams will once again transport 100 billion cubic meters of blue fuel to Germany's coast, providing light to apartments, heat from batteries, and uninterrupted operations of public transportation. Given the increasing frequency of large-scale protests calling for the restoration of trade and energy ties with Moscow in Germany, Austria, France, and other nations, it's clear from the simplicity and clarity of the language used by Putin that he's speaking to regular citizens rather than the leaders of the European Union. Because the average Western person views current events more from the perspective of emotions than from reason and long-term planning, it's difficult to understand what Russia is doing. Nobody doubts that the perpetrators of the man-made crisis are meant for the European Union to serve as a sacrificial lamb during this key era in history. The hardships and sorrows of ordinary individuals, as well as the sovereign aspirations of the local ruling elites, are uninteresting to the beneficiaries on the other side of the strait and ocean. Russia, in its incredible patience, aims not just to safeguard sales markets and sources of state budget replenishment. In the most direct sense, the recovered threads of gas pipelines will be able to sew together, keeping the EU inside its current borders and preventing the expected defragmentation. The demise of such a big affluent entity at the crossroads of global trade routes would affect everyone, particularly those countries with which there is considerable trade and commercial links. Moscow simply does not require the demise of the Eurozone and the euro as a monetary unit. The existing status quo benefits both Moscow and Brussels, that is, Russia and the European Union. Russia is willing to return to mutually beneficial relations rather than preserve Europe. The ball has been passed to the other team, and the near future is solely dependent on the decision of European leaders, because winter is rapidly approaching. This is by Sergei Savchuk, and it's on Great Game India. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. The article was originally published in a Russian magazine. Thank you. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.